Hello everyone, Desiree Scarborough here and welcome to Notes on the YouTube channel. Now, if you're joining us from Notes on TikTok where I do book and movie reviews, welcome. Notes on the YouTube channel will be a lot different because this channel will focus on highlighting individuals, advocates, activists, journalists, etc., people who are outspoken about what is going on in our world on the day-to-day. The first person that I am going to be highlighting on Notes on YouTube is Reverend Gerlyn. Reverend Gerlyn is a South Indian woman and a priest with the Anglican Church in Ontario, Canada. I first came across her TikTok a few months ago. She had just signed her will and testament, and she was sharing with the world that she was going to be making the journey with other clergy and laity people to Palestine. They weren't going to break the Gaza siege, but they were going to Palestine to tell the story of what was actually happening there. I was incredibly moved by her story, her strength, her bravery, and I immediately felt a connection and wanted to reach out to her. When I first started the Notes on TikTok, I did think about starting a YouTube channel, but I was primarily going to focus on authors, up-and-coming, new, emerging authors. But when I came across Reverend Gerlyn's TikTok, I was like, this is somebody that I absolutely want to speak to, and I think that we should share her story, share what she experienced, share what Palestinians are experiencing every day, and share that with all of you on this platform. So what you are going to watch is about an hour-long interview between Reverend Gerlyn and I. We spoke not only about her trip to Palestine, but also about her journey as a woman of color, becoming a priest and in the ministerial community. She is somebody on TikTok that speaks very openly about her support of the LGBTQ plus community. She also speaks very openly about the Christian nationalism that is at large in America today under Trump's second presidency. In our discussion, we also, of course, talk about her time in Palestine, what she heard, what she smelled, the stories that Palestinian people told her as they're living through this very horrific genocide. I felt that it was important to share what's really going on in Gaza, what Palestinians are experiencing every single day, especially because what Palestinians asked Reverend Gerlyn to do when she came back to America was to share the truth, was to share their stories. And I hope that this interview can aid in that. Lastly, I want to apologize for the echoing audio in this recording. I was not aware that that was happening while we were recording, so I will be sure to fix that for the next one. I hope that this interview continues to speak up about what's happening to Palestinians and what's happening in Gaza and what has been happening in Gaza, most recently for the last 3 years, but also for decades. Thank you for watching. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Welcome. Thank you so much for
I
being
wanted to
here.
start with some questions, just
I
getting
wanted
to
to
know
start
you.
with some questions, just getting to know you.
So please start by introducing
So
yourself.
please
Who
start by
are you?
introducing
Where are you
yourself.
from?
Who are
And
you?
how
Where are
has
you?
your relationship with the church
Your
evolved as a
relationship
woman
with
who
the
is an
church
ordained
evolved as a
priest?
woman who is an ordained priest.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Gerlyn Henry. I'm an Anglican priest here in Toronto, Canada, or like Scarborough specifically. And I serve as a parish priest as well as a public theologian through social media, which is still such a strange thing to say out loud. I didn't imagine myself here, both as a priest and as a very public one. My relationship with the church has been shaped by both where I'm from, the full Anglican tradition that's like deeply incarnational, that's sacramental, that takes a context into almost all spheres of ministry. And as a woman in ministry, I think holds both gratitude and in some ways grief. Gratitude for a church that welcomes and forms like women in leadership, and grief for the ways that women's voices, even today, are still scrutinized in ways that like other voices aren't.
Mm,
A huge part of my formation was my time as a teenager in India when my parents got there for a little while. It taught me that theology cannot be abstract, that it can't just be about me and like my relationship with God, but it is built in bodies and land and power. And so
mm,
India forced me to ask the question of who does the church serve? Who does it protect? Who does it overlook? And so it kind of moved me into a parish priest ministry that is incarnational, that matters with where it is and who it's serving.
mm. I think that's very interesting.
Mm.
I was
I think
thinking
that's
because
very
I was raised
I was thinking
Christian,
because
and
I was
as
raised
I've gotten
Christian,
older, my parents, my
as I've
family have
gotten
spoken to me
older,
about that
my family have
individual
spoken to me
relationship
about
with
that
God. And
individual
it's interesting to
relationship
hear you
with
talk
God.
about the community aspect of it as well, because that's always like my mom's argument too. She's a minister, and she's like, you have to go to church and be around the people, and that's where like things really feel really spiritual when you're communing with other people. So it's interesting to hear you talk about that as well, and the importance of that, not just the individual relationship.
Absolutely. I think like so many of us in the West are like taught that it's like all about who we are and our faith,
Mhm.
that when it comes to like the suffering of our neighbor and the joy of our neighbor, like we don't know how to share in that. And so they do what we, which I think is such a disservice. So
Yeah.
yay to your mom. Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. You began posting on TikTok in 2021. Can you explain what led you to start sharing your experience online? How did the church and clergy react to your posting on social media?
Like the sophisticated answer that I usually tell people when I want to seem like, oh yeah, I did this intentionally is that in the pandemic, people were cut off from the church and people were still yearning and hungry for meaning and language and connection. And so
Mhm.
I thought like I would fill that space. But if I'm being honest, like I was that person. I had just finished my 2 years of training to become a priest. And by the time I was to be ordained, the pandemic was like in full effect. And so there was nobody in church. It was except me and my one supervisor. I was yearning for like spaces of connection. And my
Mm.
supervisor, I love him. Like may he rest in peace. But he was more perfect than I was. He was older, he was white, he wore like a leather jacket, and he just looked like he was always meant to be an Anglican priest. And I was struggling with like what to look like, how to be in this space as a young woman of color who didn't have all the answers. And I thought about capturing what that experience was like online because it felt like such an anomaly. And at the time, as soon as people realized, oh, like Gerlyn's now a priest, I was like inundated with questions I didn't have answers to. Like a lot of the questions at the time was, why did God kill my dad in the pandemic and then not let me see him? Or like, does God want me to get vaccinated?
Mm.
um does it show that I'm not faithful if I get a vaccine? Or should women even be priests? Like these questions were just like coming into all of my DMs in places that I never expected. And
Mm.
the reaction from clergy was mixed, for sure.
Okay.
I think early on, 5 years ago, like some people just didn't see the point in it. They felt like this was the time to do on the ground work with your parish and not to be online. And others thought that this was intriguing and like they were interested but not like bought in, because clergy talk is like not as filtered as clergy is in person. Like who I am in online is very different in some ways than like how I present in church. And so like one of the early things like my diocese asked is that yes, you are free to speak online as a priest, right? As a person with a collar, but you can't represent the diocese with like those views because those views might not be in line with institutional views. And so
Mm.
to hold that together was important. But online people kept saying like, "Oh, I've never seen a priest do this," or "I never knew that churches believe this." And
Right.
that made it all worth it.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I had a question too, because when all those questions are coming in, did that help reinforce how you felt being a woman of color that's a priest? Did it just open up more questions for you? Or how did it, I guess, transform your experience as a new priest?
Ah, such a good question. I was not prepared for the amount of pushback or like or hate that I would get as a women priest. Because
Mm.
up to then, like all the formation, there were so many women who were like being formed. So it wasn't in the front of my mind that people didn't like it. But my very first week at the job in my office, somebody like booked an appointment and I was like so excited. I was like, oh, my first like official appointment with someone. And they brought in a big sleeping bag to this. And I didn't know who they were. They were just from the neighborhood. And they came in, told me that like I shouldn't be here and that
Mm.
my mother raised me wrong and that I should take the sleeping bag and leave the house that I was living in. Like
Wow.
in my office. Like it was, and so I think at first I was unprepared. So I really felt kind of somewhat rage when that happened. And when I saw him at like a restaurant later, I was just like, "Bruh." But I think I've learned to take it more delicately. Some people really just haven't experienced this. And other people, like, if they're trolling me, I can troll back. Like, I've learned to kind of respond humorously,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes it hurts. Sometimes.
Yeah, I can
Yeah, I can
imagine. And I
imagine.
mean,
And I mean,
did you
did
receive
you receive
support from the
support
other
from the other
clergy when you were
clergy when you were
experiencing like something
experiencing
like
like
that
something
sleeping
like that
bag
sleeping bag
incident? Like, were
incident?
they
Like,
like,
were they like,
I'm really
I'm really
sorry, or were they kind of
sorry,
just
or were
like,
they kind of just like,
this comes with the
this comes with the
territory? What was the
territory?
reaction
What was
like
the
for you?
reaction like for you?
I think from the men, it was like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm surprised that happened. And because I don't think women shared as much, I'm guessing. But from the few women in my deanery, there's only like three women, they were very clear that this comes with the territory. Like, this is how you can deal with it.
Mm,
We all experience this. Don't let it break you down, which is
yeah,
really helpful to hear that this wasn't like an isolated experience.
right. Yeah. Well,
Right.
I'm glad you
Yeah.
have that
Well, I'm glad
community
you have
too
that
of other
community
women
too
that
of
are
other women
priests.
that are priests. Yes.
Unfortunately, that
Unfortunately,
experience,
that experience,
that is something
that
I've
is
never
something
thought
I've
to
never
even
thought
do
to even
as
do
well.
as well.
Wow.
Wow.
Speaking of your
Speaking of
values
your
that
values
you speak
that you
about
speak about
online,
online,
you speak very
you speak
openly
very
about your
openly about your
acceptance of
acceptance of
everyone, the
everyone, the
LGBTQ
LGBT
plus, trans
plus,
people,
trans
even
people, even
tattoos and sharing your
tattooed and
own.
sharing your own.
What has your
What
experience
has your
been
experience been
interacting with the
interacting
other clergy and
with the clergy and
congregation as someone
congregation as
outspoken
someone
about these
outspoken about these
topics?
topics?
One of the gifts of being Anglican, which is like a somewhat older, more established, but in minority church, is
Mm,
that it holds together three like things. So everything that we say and think like is kind of revolves around this scripture, tradition, and reason. And
mm,
into that, like experience as like what is lived experience. So my openness, I think, and welcome doesn't come from wanting to be provocative, but it comes from taking incarnation seriously, that God came in flesh to be here. And
mm,
God meets people in real bodies and real lives and real language. I remember like I hate it when people call me out for for cussing when I'm talking about things that matter to life and death. There was this one video right when like ICE was coming out and starting its raids. I started a video and I said like to be a real Christian, you have to love your neighbor, I swear. And
mm.
it got like a million views, but most of the engagement was about the fact that I said, I swear, and how, like, as a Christian, I shouldn't say, I swear. And it was like, it was so confusing to me because the point of the video was that we need to love our neighbor, but people are caught in the semantics of it.
Right.
The diocese is predominantly progressive. Like most Anglican priests share my values, share my thoughts. It's an affirming diocese. And I
Okay.
think it's far more affirming than people realize because the voices online, the loudest voices are the ones that say, like, no, like we hate queer people. Everyone's going to go to hell if you don't believe in Jesus. But
Hmm.
that is not the mainline theology at all. So it's unfortunate that like we share this message of inclusivity every Sunday, but in so many ways it just stays within the walls of the steeple.
Right.
Right.
That's true
That's
because I
true because
was,
I
of
was,
course, reading
of
your
course, reading your
comments as
comments
well.
as well.
And so many
And
people
so
are
many people
focusing
are
on
focusing
the
on
church
the
doesn't
church doesn't
support
support
this.
this.
And to hear
And
you
to hear
say
you
that
say
there are
that there are
actually lots
actually
of
lots
clergy
of
that are
clergy
in
that are in
support of
support
it.
of it.
It's very
It's
interesting because
very
I don't
interesting
think
because I don't think
most people know
most people
that.
know
And
that.
even
And even
kind of if you
kind of
talk
if you
about
talk
it,
about
they
it,
just
they
immediately
just
refute,
immediately
which I
refute,
guess
which
is
I guess
just the
is
nature
just
of
the
the
nature of the
internet.
internet.
So we can't really help that.
So we can't really help
But
that.
I also didn't know that. So
I
it's
also
great to
didn't
hear
know
that
that. So
as
it's
well.
great to hear that as well.
Oh, good. I think I need to name that more often as like a baseline because I'm surprised how many people don't know that.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think people
Yeah, I think
see you
people
as one person
see
doing
you
it,
as one person
and
doing
think
it,
it's just
and
you.
think it's
And it's
just
not
you,
like,
and it's
I don't
not
know,
like,
maybe
I
even
don't know,
60,
maybe
seventy
even
percent
60,
of people
seventy
that you
percent
might
of
know
people that
feel
you
the
might
same
know
way.
feel the same way.
Um,
Um,
so yeah, I think it
so
would
yeah, I
also
think
be
it would
cool if
also be cool
other
if
priests
other
spoke out
priests
about it
spoke
as
out
well,
about it
if
as
they
well,
felt
if
so
they
led.
felt so led.
Mm, that's really good feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you talk a
Can you
bit
talk
about
a
your
bit about your
journey to the
journey to
beliefs
the
and
beliefs and
acceptances that you
acceptances
led
that
your
you led
community
your
with, that you
community
lead
with,
your
that you
community
lead your
with,
community with?
sorry?
Sorry.
Was this taught
Was
to you
this
as a
taught to you as a
child, or
child?
have you
Have you
adopted some of
adopted
your
some of your
beliefs from
beliefs from
travels,
travels,
seminary
seminary
school, mission
school, mission
trips,
trips,
etc.?
etc.?
Thank you for that. A lot of my theology was shaped before seminary. My
Mm,
parents like always raised us to look at people's lives, to actually know stories before being and like forming any judgments. I remember when I decided I wanted to go to like be some sort of God person, still wasn't sure what that was. My
mm,
dad said, absolutely not. You're not doing an undergrad in religious studies. if you do, by the time you graduate, you're not going to know the world at all. And it doesn't make sense to be in this world if you don't know what's here. And I remember being like so upset at the time, thinking like he's holding me back from serving God. But I did an undergrad in social work, and like it really broadened how I see the world and how like I see God mattering to people. Theology can be so poisonous when it's like in the hands of power, when it's like laying with greed. And a huge part of like my leadership style is recognizing like how deeply I've made mistakes, how deeply my theology has hurt people, and to make a conscious effort not to do that. Like I
Mm,
started a series on TikTok, so called it like mistakes I've made as a priest. And like two of the ones that like really resonated with people was this one time I was on a mission trip as a teenager, and we were called into this like girl's house to quote unquote cast out a demon. And like
mm,
if I think about it now, I was 17 years old. This was very new to me. Like we looked very different than that village. And by the time we got there and like we met this kid, we were praying for a demon to be delivered from her. I remember looking at her in the middle of this prayer and just realizing how disconnected she was to what was happening. And
mm,
that maybe the point of us being there was just to like scare her into obedience. Her parents
mm.
called us in. We look different, act different, and are now accusing her uncompliance as like demonic. And I
Right.
left feeling like that was a huge mistake.
Mm,
And I think like things like that and recognizing that in myself has really been helpful in like forming my leadership style. But
yeah.
learning to be conservative came later. I had to like learn what the conservative voice was. And the undergrad degree really gave me language to name what I was seeing with what God was doing, and then being able to see systems of power in it. Like what we're seeing in the US right now is like Christian nationalism. It is nationalism that has fallen into bed with Christianity and not vice versa.
Right. Right. That's so interesting. I'm to be so young and do something like that and go to this person's place. And I mean, did you guys speak to her? Did she talk to you, or was it kind of just like blank and you guys are kind of like praying or talking at her? Like, what was your interaction with her like?
It was, we didn't speak to her, or maybe we said hello to her, but
Mm,
her parents are the ones who came over to our leaders, and our leaders picked a few of us to go. And I think our leaders picked people who they thought, I think, had like powerful words when we could pray, and the parents picked those who they thought would be like the most domineering, the ones
mm,
who kind of maybe looked the most foreign, is what I could think about. So all we said was like, hello, like, how are you doing? And I remember her just being like blank. I'm guessing now it's because she knew I was about to come and like,
right,
she didn't oblige.
right. Wow. Did you have any other, this is on my list of questions, but now I'm like intrigued by this story. Did you have any other mission trips like while you were younger or kind of like at the start of your priesthood that you felt were mistakes that I guess I'm also thinking too how, I mean, that was, you were 17, so it's been some time, how maybe that informs the way that you speak to other young people that are interested in serving the church. How is that kind of shaping the way that you lead as well?
So since then, I haven't gone on a quote unquote mission trip because I
Okay.
think like mission trips in itself are, I don't know, I don't know how fair this is, but I feel like in some ways when like the mission trips that are like about young people that go and proselytize other groups, I
Hmm.
think they have like these great fallacies that we have the answers and like the people we meet are like uncivilized. They don't have the answers.
Mm,
Whereas when you're 17 or even like in your early 20s, you don't have any answers about God. Like you have questions that you can share with others. And I remember like in my first parish, someone asked me like, like we want to go serve the poor in, I think they said Brazil. And
mm,
I was like, and I said, no, absolutely not. We're not going to go and serve the poor. If you want to serve people, like serve people in your community. Like we're in the midst of an economic crisis,
right.
and nobody signed up for the serve people in your local community like
Mm,
project in the ways that they wanted to kind of go out and experience a new culture and serve.
right.
Yeah. but it has deeply shaped how I engage with people, especially young people now. A
Mm.
lot of like what I share with young people is that like figure it out. Like you have questions, figure it out. You think you have an answer, let's test it. And so there's this very like lighthearted way of experiencing God. When
Mhm.
we're older, I think sometimes I might offer what I think is like a good way to think about something, but predominantly, I always answer a question with a question to invite like self-reflection.
Mm.
Hmm.
I love
I
that.
love that.
I love that. You
Oh,
spoke
you
about a
spoke about a
quote that changed
quote
the
that
way that you
changed the way that you
preach.
preach.
You can't be a
You
coward
can't
in the
be a coward in
pulpit,
the
which I
pulpit, which I
absolutely love
absolutely
that.
love
I thought
that.
about
I
that
thought
for a
about that
while
for a
after I
while
saw your
after I saw your
video.
video.
Told to you
Told
by
to
one
you
of
by
your
one
late
of your
leaders
late leaders
after, I
after, I
believe,
believe,
Trump's first
Trump's first
election.
election.
How have you
How have
lived
you
and
lived and
spoken
spoken
differently since
differently
then?
since then?
Ah, so this was the same supervisor with the leather jacket, like who
Oh,
I was with when I first started.
okay.
It it's really reshaped how I understand my role in ministry. I think until that point, I knew that silence was not neutrality and that like silence always serves power. I knew it in my mind. You know, I'd read the MLK like stories. I've read about this before. But
Mm-hmm.
I'd never considered until then that people who come to church actually look to their priests and they yearn to understand the world that they're living in through the lens of faith. And that in my ordination, I'm now obligated to do that work. And my supervisor, Eric Beresford, he said that I did a disservice to every single person who came to the church that day. I did a disservice to every single person who watched. And I think that like it really moved me and it confused me, it challenged me. The
Mm-hmm.
pulpit, I learned then, was like not a place for self-preservation, that it was a place to tell truth with love. It was
Mm.
one of the first times I recognized my own responsibility as a pastor and not just being a pastor as an achievement or some a goal to conquer. With Trump's second time resuming office, that call to courage feels even more urgent, particularly as Christian nationalism has been so loud, so well organized, and so theologically distorted. Like
Yeah.
all this language of hate and unwelcome is branded with a cross. And I often think of Marianne Buddy, who reminds us that Christian courage is not about dominance or certainty, but it's about clarity and faithfulness to the gospel. It's one of the reasons I often like use scripture when I talk about what's happening in the world to remind people like the Bible is where it starts and this is what's clear and what we're doing is not.
Mm-hmm.
Christian nationalism like demands allegiance to power, but Christianity demands allegiance to love. And I'm still nervous, like even till date, like I get kind of worried about what people are gonna think about what I say and how I say it. But in the year and a half that since that's happened, like I say it anyway.
Right. I remember
I
a
remember a
video you
video you
shared
shared
about the man
about the
that
man
walked
that
out
walked
while you
out
were
while you were
preaching and
preaching,
did a
did a
grand
grand
bow.
bow.
Since that, now
Since
it's
that,
been
now it's been
a full
a full
year
year
of his
of
second
his second
presidency. Yeah,
presidency.
sorry, it's
Yeah,
been
sorry,
really
it's been
long,
really long
2025.
2025.
How
How
have there been
have
any
there
other
been any other
instances like
instances
that
like that
since you
since you
kind of
kind of
shifted the way that
shifted
you
the way that you
preach
preach,
and speaking more
speaking more
openly
openly
about
about
things?
things?
Have there been
Have there
any
been
other
any other
situations like
situations
that?
like
Do you
that?
find
Do
that
you
people
find
are
that people are
thankful for you
thankful
just
for
speaking
you
your
just speaking
mind?
your mind?
Mm. It's a very good question. I think there's been I think like doing that so publicly in so that was like a regional conference and so like a lot of people were gathered it was shared quite widely. I think doing that so publicly really opened up a space for people to receive it. I remember when I said the word genocide in that sermon, there was this audible like groan in this 200-person congregation. And
Wow.
that groan was both, yeah, that groan like unsettled me because I was like, is this a groan of anger? But I
Hmm.
think it was a groan of like, what could it be? A groan of acceptance? Like, yes, it's a genocide. And we finally heard it from the pulpit.
Mm.
And that really gave me some courage. So I think almost every single sermon I've preached since then, I've alluded, if not like mentioned clearly, that it's an occupation, that there
Right.
is a genocide in Sudan, that this is happening in Congo. Because
Hmm.
people, I think, are scared to hear it from the pulpit. And now that it's said, it's been said. But there's been like a shift though. I don't know if it's in the world or in the church, but it reminds me of that book title by Omar Akkad. It says, "One day, everyone will have always been against this."
Mm,
At this point, like 2.5 years in from October 7th, it almost feels like, yeah, like we want you to speak on Palestine.
mhm,
But in the beginning, it was very, very difficult. I got emails saying, like, I heard you say genocide on Sunday this morning. Like, I don't agree. Here's an article I read that's like really pro-Zionist propaganda. Like, where
mm,
is everybody going to go? The number of people who asked me, like, do you condemn Hamas? Like, it
mm.
was very difficult in the beginning, but now everyone has always been against this.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. I think that's really true and very interesting, and it makes me even think about I'm not sure if you saw like the recent Golden Globe coverage as well,
Mhm.
the outreach of more celebrities speaking about it. There were also some celebrities that held a separate art forum for musicians that was separate from the Golden Globes and they couldn't go. Some people like Pedro Pascal who have been wearing like the Free Palestine pins for the last year or so now. And it's like you said, it's so widely accepted for people to be against the genocide. But I definitely remember that part of TikTok in the very beginning, when people were like, no, everybody has a right to defend themselves and war happened. And then the argument is, but it's not a war, because
Yeah.
Palestine, Gazans do not have a military that's fighting the Israeli military. That whole back and forth, and like now it's just become it's a genocide, and everybody has accepted that for the most part. So it's interesting how things change and how charged conversations become, and then all of a sudden things kind of flow a bit. Because I was noticing with your comments when you were talking about your stories from Palestine, I didn't really see a whole lot of people in disbelief or not really supporting you, which
Yeah.
felt like a huge shift from where I started in the beginning. That changes. How does that change feel for you too?
It, it- if part of me, I'm like so grateful, right? I'm thinking like, oh wow, like this is such a great space for all of us to like to share our stories and like to really reaffirm our beliefs. The occasional like, oh, I didn't know about this is still like really gratifying. But
Mm,
I'm also at the same time like so frustrated by that. I'm like, where were your voices? Where were all of our voices? Like, why hadn't we organized in the beginning when this
right.
was like so important, when we were seeing children and women and men like just massacred?
Mm-hmm.
Where were we now? But I'm kind of holding that rage in somewhat because I recognize that if that's the narrative I put out, then I'm going to lose the people who are listening. But
Mm.
inside there's that deep frustration and anger that we let it get this far before we're all on the same page.
Yeah, I agree. I think people feel similarly about Trump's election to be a year out now, people changing their minds and documentaries coming out about people that are starving in this country of the US. So I also feel a little annoyance, anger, because I'm like, the gap of the voting, guys, like, come on. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's like we want people to change their minds and be educated, but there is also it's human, I guess,
Mhm.
frustration for sure. Okay. A fun question before we delve into your trip to Palestine. I heard in one of your posts that you play the drums. Do you play anything at church or are you in a band?
That's one of the things I really, really miss. I used to love playing like the drums and the guitar and just in church or just anywhere. But
Mhm.
it's so hard to do that now when you're like dressed as an Anglican priest. I tried
Mm,
it one time. Like we wanted to include some like diversity of music and I played the guitar. So I was like, oh yeah, sure, I'll do it. But then to be in my chasuble and like have the guitar on, it it didn't look right and it was too messy. And
mhm.
so I decided like if I'm gonna be the priest, like I can't be the musician at the same time. But oh, I miss it so much. I wish I could like join a drum circle of some sort.
Yeah. Or I don't know, start a church band. I know you're already really busy and you're there all the time, but could be fun.
Absolutely. That's on the radar. It's
I
on the
love
radar.
it. Okay, great. So on the topic of Palestine,
You'll never see on the screen. Not very pretty, but we sure know how to run things. Living in ruins of the palace within my dreams. And you know, we're on each other's team. I'm kinda over getting told to throw my hands up in the air. So there. I'm kinda older than I was when I felt without a care. Call all the ladies out there in their finery. 100 trillion thoughts, 100 drills between teeth. Now bring my boys in their skin.
so you began speaking out about Palestine and using the correct word, genocide. What led you to speak on it? And did your fellow priests support you on this?
Hmm. So I use the word genocide because accuracy matters, at least in the very beginning, especially for Christians. We learn about Zionism in seminary and school, and I
Mm,
grew up with the knowledge of Palestine and apartheid in South Africa. And I was in South Africa as like an internship when in 2013, 2014. We had like a Palestinian who now I'm like friends with come and kind of share her experience of occupation in Palestine and to actually see somebody who is Palestinian and to hear that story and compare that with post-apartheid. Because by
mm,
that time I knew like, oh yeah, apartheid was wrong. It's been 15 years. We're all over this. To hear that comparison like really opened my eyes. And my mom went to a really progressive seminary. She's also a priest.
oh,
And so
nice.
when I was a teenager, yeah, she used to take us to like some of the conferences in her seminary. And so I learned about the Nakba as like a young teenager, which was really helpful in understanding like, okay, I don't know all the complexities of this, but I know that occupation is wrong and
Mm,
that Israel is not Israel from the Bible.
mhm,
But the courage to use the word genocide faded for me, especially in those like early years, because it really strained relationships with parishioners and colleagues and dioceses. Just people were so like hesitant to use the word genocide, even though like it was right. Amnesty said it was the word genocidal acts, but I think like I think as we just kind of talked about, after that initial shock when everybody who knew this was genocide, that 2 years in between was just so laborsome as we watched people die over and over again.
mm,
But all of the energy was spent on talking about, is this a genocide or not? Is it genocidal? And
right.
then that person who walked out of my sermon, after that, I had like a renewed sense of courage on one hand that, yeah, like this language and the shock effect of it is worth the consequence. And then at the same time, I also wondered if like the language was being distractive in some ways. And so now like I still talk about atrocities, I still say genocide, but I always like talk about it a little bit more so that there is somewhere in that conversation where people can agree. Like where's that common ground? If it's not in the word genocide, is it in mass killing of innocent people,
Mhm.
abuse of power? Like I try to find like language there where people can agree so that we don't get caught on the word.
Right.
Similar to anti-Semitism, I feel like it's such a trigger word now that
Mm,
if you don't qualify it in some way, people are like, whoa.
yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. Did speaking out about what's happening bring up any contradictions or make any of your relationships with the churchgoers tense slash strained?
Yes. Yes. Um, in the diocesan level and clergy level, there was a small group of priests who were very open and outspoken, so I found some solace there. But like even in our large gatherings, like our synod or our eight general meeting is I guess what the common word is, there were people who rose up to like still oppose conversations about Palestine and genocide and like reaffirming our commitment to ending apartheid. And
Mm,
like they were kind of all sitting together. And so when like people from that thought spoke up, you could just palpably sense the tension in the room. And it's been unfortunate. I'm still fairly new to the diocese. I've only been in the diocese as a priest for 3 years. And so
Okay.
I don't know everybody, but I feel like they haven't spoken to me in 3 years. And I wonder how that'll grow. Will this continue? Yeah. But in
Yeah.
terms of my parishioners, like there was some strain, and some parishioners like still haven't spoken to me about it since the beginning. But I'm like, I try to be deeply pastoral, that the values and the beliefs that I hold are what I hold, and there I'm very clear about that. But I still value and like care about you as a parishioner. And so
Mm-hmm.
I try to be very pastoral in having those conversations while
Right.
being faithful to like what I believe.
Right. Do you feel that people are offering you that same sort of gesture that even if you may not agree, or even if they feel, if they don't agree fully with how you feel about the genocide in Palestine, do they still treat you with respect pastorally, as you said? Is that vice versa or no?
I think in some cases, yes.
Mm.
Because I've only been here 3 years, like I haven't built a ton of like I don't know what the appropriate word is, but if you I don't know if you read that book called How the Art of Not Giving a Fuck. She talks about fuck bucks and
Mm.
like you invest them and at some point you can like make a withdrawal.
Mm-hmm.
I Some people have left the church, like very few, and some people have made their thoughts known, and I think they will come back when we're not as like politically driven. But
Mm.
for the most part, people are prioritize relationship. They prioritize conversation and have remained in the midst of those conversations. Because there are
Mm.
other things we disagree about, which like from the beginning I've said like it's okay that you disagree with me. We don't have to believe the same things.
Mm. That's interesting. Politically charged. Hmm.
Mhm.
Okay. I've really enjoyed watching how you connect what Israel is inflicting on Palestinians to scripture and stories in the Bible, which you touched on. What made you decide to go from educating online to putting boots on the ground, as they say, and going to Palestine yourself?
I was very surprised to be invited to go on that trip. I think
Mm.
in some ways, like it was a consequence of like my social media presence to have had these conversations and it have the reach that it had. I think put me on the radar of those who are organizing this trip. And like,
Okay.
because I felt very underqualified to be on that delegation. Along on that delegation was like my bishop and the dean of the seminary. And here I was like very young, very new to the diocese. I don't know, I felt very underqualified to be on it.
Mm.
And I didn't know much about Israel on the ground because I had boycotted Israel and like images of it and food from it for over 10 years now. And yes, I've been like part of protests and like rallies here, but I didn't have an understanding of what it would be like. And at some point, I realized like if I'm going to be talking about this faithfully, it must be embodied. My theology must be embodied. And so I like accepted the invitation to go.
Okay. So you said, which I didn't realize, that you were invited to go. So was this put on by the church, and then they invited you, or someone else? Sorry.
There's this organization called Sabeel Ecumenical Liberation Organization. It's like an organization in Palestine, and their work, and I think it was developed, founded by this theologian called Naam Atik.
Hmm.
And the whole purpose of it is to build bridges on theology amongst Christians in the world when it talks about liberation of Palestine and liberation of people around the world.
Hmm.
And so there's a Canadian chapter and there's a North American chapter as well.
Okay.
It's Canadian is called Canadian Friends of Sabeel.
Hmm.
And the diocese received a grant, and the grant was to have clergy people go on this trip. And so I think the diocese picked people who were like part of the conversation on the ground to go and be part of the solidarity pilgrimage.
Interesting. Okay. Gotcha. I have to look into that.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
very, very much encourage people to go. Like it's
yeah. Okay. Interesting. Can you talk a
Can you
bit
talk a
about
bit
how you
about how
felt
you
leading up
felt
to the
leading up to the
journey,
journey,
knowing that it was
knowing that
something
it was
you were
something you
called
were
to
called
do,
to
but
do,
also
but
facing
also
your
facing your
mortality?
mortality?
What were your
What
thoughts
were your
as you
thoughts
signed
as you
your
signed
will and
your will and
testament, which is,
testament,
I
which
think,
is,
the
I
first
think, the
video I
first
saw
video
of
I
yours,
saw
which
of
is how I
yours, which is
found
how
you?
I found you?
And also, how did
And
your
also, how
partner
did
feel
your
about you
partner feel
making this
about you making
journey?
this journey?
My partner was nervous. He wondered, I think, on some ways, like, why are you even going on this trip instead of giving the money to the cause?
Mm,
Which I think a lot of people also wondered. We were planning to go before the ceasefire came into effect.
mhm,
And I think the impact of having gone and the impact of what we could potentially do upon returning, that felt like worth it. While I was nervous, he was nervous, he was also very supportive.
mm,
Facing my own mortality was terrifying. I knew that I was called to go, but I also knew that there were like really clear risks, and signing my will was sobering. I've worked as a chaplain and I've been alongside death so many times, but I'd never fully considered like the potential of, in this context, I could potentially not come back.
right.
It stripped away this like romantic notion of, yeah, we're going on a pilgrimage to to the Holy Land. But the
Mm,
organizers, Sibyl, were very confident that we would be safe if we listened and didn't question what they were asking us to do, like in the moment.
mm,
The same pilgrimage happened within the diocese about 10 years ago. And one of the priests wrote to me and said, yo, the last time I was there, like we were sitting and having tea, and then suddenly we had to like flee because there were gunshots. And I was like,
wow.
whoa, that doesn't make me feel any more confident.
Right.
Right.
But
Wow.
Wow.
yeah, but I didn't disclose to my parish that I was nervous because I think if I kind of shared to them that I was nervous, their nervousness would have just been like much more. So
Mm-hmm.
I asked my colleague to sign my will as a witness, and I
Mm,
think that moment was like the moment it felt really real. That after this, I might not see him, I might not come back. But
right.
at the same time, that to feel that for a moment in exchange for the opportunity to tell the story of what Palestinians feel every single day, the
Mm-hmm.
risk of their lives, like, I'll take the risk. It was worth it.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow. And thank you for
And thank
making
you
that
for making
pilgrimage,
that
and I'm
pilgrimage, and I'm
glad you're
glad
back.
you're back.
Yeah.
Can you
Yes. Can
share
you
the
share
feeling
the
of being
feeling
on the
of
ground in
being on the ground in
Palestine,
Palestine,
knowing you didn't break the
knowing you didn't break
siege?
the siege?
What did you
What did you
hear,
hear,
feel, and
feel, and
smell? How did
smell?
it
How did
feel
it
to
feel
be
to
standing
be
near or in
standing
an
near or
area
in an
that has
area
had so
that has
much
had so
death
much
and
death and
Yeah.
just, I
just
can't even
I
imagine
can't
what
even imagine
the
what
spirit of
the
that place
spirit of
feels
that
like
place feels
being
like
there.
being there.
Mm, excellent question. Being on the ground in Palestine was like profoundly sobering because I knew that like I didn't have the means to fix it. And they had told us like you're not here to fix it. Like don't start any fights. I wasn't going to break the siege. I was there to like bear witness. And that unsettled me like deeply because I hadn't seen anything about Israel. Like I hadn't looked at pictures even for so long. If
Mhm.
I'm like being completely honest, the first 2 days were really hard for me because the first 2 days we spent in the Israeli side of Jerusalem, and I was falling into the propaganda. I remember like thinking on like day two, like, wait, have I misunderstood the conflict? Like, because Israel isn't that bad. At
Mm,
some point, these like 8 feet, 8 meter high walls, they kind of disappear from your line of view. You forget that behind the wall are people who don't have water, don't have food, don't have access. Because
right.
within the walls, it looks very similar to what it looks like here in the West. It
Wow.
and so it took me till day three to realize, like, okay, that was propaganda and I'd fallen for it. And as
Mm,
somebody who talked about Palestine for so long and was so on the side of Palestinian liberation, the fact that I fell for the propaganda, like within 2 days, like that really kind of shook me.
mhm.
But but when we crossed the wall, like it all made sense. I remember when we were in Hebron, you could like hear the faintest smell of tear gas. And
Mm,
Hebron was like a city under siege. It's like so hard to imagine, but like all of the houses were boarded up with wire and metal because settlers would just walk down the street and shoot at people. Like
wow.
right next to a Palestinian home is like settler homes, and the Palestinian home doesn't have like electricity or access to free water, but all the settler homes have like 24-hour water. And we were sitting inside one of the Palestinian homes, and like a police officer was holding his gun, like this AK-47 kind of machine gun, and just like watching. It's a city under siege, and like the air smelt of tear gas, like the air smelt of war.
Wow.
I, yeah. And I remember another time we were going to this like Bedouin village called Care, and there was this person. I don't like, you may have heard this on the news, or if you haven't, like it was on the news everywhere. His name was Aude Hatlin, and he was part of the one of the creators of the documentary No One's Land. I think that's the documentary name. And in the video, like that he is filming himself, or like that people are filming, the settlers are building a settlement around this village. And at the end of the day, when like the settlement is almost done being built, the bulldozer like rides through the the village land, like destroying some of the plantation. And so people go out to say like, "Oh, stop, stop." And we can see on video this settler, Enon Levi, he's like showing his gun around, and he fires a bullet and it hits Aude, and he dies while holding his child. And we were in that village, and we could see the spot where he was killed with no consequence. And like to like, I don't know, once you see like a faint blood stain, once you meet the woman who just lost her husband to a settler who just killed him for no reason, really,
Right.
it leaves a stain on your soul.
Mm. I can imagine. I mean, how does I'm skipping ahead a bit to another question I have on the list, but how does your relationship with God feel after that trip, during that trip? Like, what were you thinking? What were you praying for? I mean, just being there in that, being in that home, being in that environment, knowing like on the other side of this wall, like people did not go without. Like, how was that, I guess?
I the trip didn't take my questions away. I think it sharpened them. Being there made suffering seem all that more palpable and like less abstract, because you can't explain away what you see and what you smell. And I remember thinking a lot of the people causing this pain are either Christians or have been like taught by Christians, right? There was this one time we were 30 minutes from Gaza, but we couldn't get to Gaza. And we
Right.
kept hearing this like loud noise, just like random loud noises. And it took me a while to realize. And I looked up and I saw these like tiny little triangles in the sky, like so faint in the sky, that these were warplanes going to Gaza. And they were so far up in the sky, and they were so loud on the ground. So I can't imagine how it is like in Gaza, in for these kids who are like having to hear this all the time.
Right.
I'm not past questioning God. I think like, God, why is this happening? Like, why haven't you just swooped in and fixed it? But I think in some ways, like we're doing this in God's name. And even when like justice is delayed and it feels like the world is falling apart, God is in us, with us in the lament. God is with us in the courage. And God is with us in like reminding us that like every human life is sacred, and every human life that suffers needs to be redeemed. I think of like my own uh, participation in like doing evil things in the name of God. I remember being a part of this like raid to save children who were being child vendors. And as part of that raid, like we essentially kidnapped these kids. And I remember thinking that it was so noble. And I did it. Like I was part of picking up this kid, putting him in a van, and then taking him and convincing him that like this was for his own good. And I think in some ways, like that's what's happening in Palestine. People who like have Zionism and as part of their like understanding, they think like they're participating in what is holy and what is of God. And
Right.
so like people who are dying, Palestinians who are dying, are just collateral. They're part of God's plan. And to undo that is more important, I think, than to at least for me, than to ask God, like, why haven't you fixed it? Because I feel like it's our responsibility to change that theology.
Hmm.
But yeah.
And what was the attitude, I guess, of, I mean, you spoke about the propaganda, but I imagine maybe you could hear those faint sounds on the opposite side of the wall. Like, how did people seem to respond to that? Like, Israelis seem to respond to that, or was it kind of just like muted out for them?
It's muted out. It is so crazy. They have like on the Israeli side going into like Palestinian territory, there was this, I can send you the picture. There's like one
Okay.
big sign that said, like, in this border, you are entering Palestinian territory, and the lives of Israelis are at stake, are in danger if you cross this line.
Wow.
And I remember standing there and looking at the sign, and there's one Palestinian in his car who's going into the land. He looks at the 10 of us and he says, it's not true. We're very kind people. But I think for Israelis who are there, they see the sign and they think, oh yeah, like I can never go in there because I'll be killed. And so
Mm,
they never see what's behind the wall. They don't see like the vast atrocities and the vast differences. That there are more and more secular Jews who are leaving Israel because of like the occupation, because of the corruption. But
hmm.
I think those who are there, who are ideological Jews, who are there because they believe so deeply in the idea of Zionism, the idea of this is like the holy land for Jews, it's easy for them not to see what's beyond the wall.
Wow. So are they not, I guess I think about social media and everything, kind of how we're, I guess because I share posts so often, I feel inundated with lots of visuals of, reporters and things like that who are there on the ground, and people like Greta Gerwig and, or sorry, Greta Thunberg,
Mhm.
who get captured trying to bring aid. Do Israelis, ideological Israelis, do they not see those things online at all?
Mm. Great, great question. What we learned about like the Israeli soldiers who are going to Gaza is
Mhm.
that like initially when the after October 7th broke out, a lot of young, so everybody has to be a soldier in Israel. Like it's part of your service. You have to serve in
Mm,
the military for at least 2 years when you turn 18. So there are like really young minds who go. And at that point, I don't think they know enough to question their ideology. They see like Arabs as savages, Arabs as people who attack their people. And I
mm,
think in time, a lot of like soldiers realize like, oh, this isn't right. I don't need to be killing children and women who are innocent. And so Israel changed its tactic and moved young soldiers away from Gaza and put older, more seasoned soldiers who at that time I think either have been desensitized or so deeply believing what's been taught. So there's been like this strategic change from young Israelis who are new and questioning to seasoned Israeli soldiers who have this is their life. And a lot of the soldiers come out with deep, deep PTSD. There's this whole documentary on soldiers who left the idea of feeling like they can never go back to real life. So many soldiers have taken their lives because
mm,
this is hard even for them. And when we have compassion for Palestinians who are being murdered, in some way we must have compassion for the idea of soldiers who don't know better and
mm,
realize like afterwards that they've ruined their own lives as well as lives of Arabs.
mm. And those older soldiers, I guess, have been soldiers since they were 18. So maybe it's been decades of this, and they
Right.
don't think they can do anything else.
Yeah. 'Cause
Mm.
we didn't speak to any older soldiers. The documentary that we saw was
Yeah.
only of younger soldiers.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Oh, I wanted to talk to you about the situation with Omar. You were making 15 videos about what you saw and witnessed in Palestine, which I will direct people to watch. Are there any standout stories or revelations that you like to share? And you had mentioned you shared a post about the Western Wall slash Muslim Wall when you and the clergy were allowed to enter, but Omar, who is Palestinian, I believe, couldn't.
Mhm.
How was that for you?
That was on day 2. So this was kind of by this time I was beginning to fall for the propaganda. I'm thinking like Israel isn't that bad. I think we're misunderstanding something really deeply.
Mm.
And we get to the Western Wall, and up till this point, because I had boycotted Israel in my mind and in like the way I live my life, I'd never had a desire to go to the Western Wall. It was so far from what I had like hoped to do in Israel. So we get there, and all we have to do to get from like kind of the passage where we're walking to the Western Wall is go through security. If you have a bag, you put it on the security thing and then you walk through.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody is being questioned. It's you just walk through. It is a free movement. And this is happening in Jerusalem. And for Palestinians to be in Jerusalem, they have to do two things. They have to have a permit that says that their center of life is in Jerusalem. And if they have this permit, they can move freely in Jerusalem. They can work and live and exist in Jerusalem. But if they live in the Palestinian side of Jerusalem, they have to go through a checkpoint to get to the Israeli side, which is where the Western Wall is. But he's a Jerusalemite, and if you're not a Jerusalemite, you just cannot be in Jerusalem. So
Okay.
the fact that he was there means that like he has all the legal reasons to be there. And so we get there and we're getting in line to go. And the person comes out and he's speaking to them, speaking to Omar in Hebrew. And Omar says, I don't speak Hebrew. He grew up at a time when Hebrew wasn't like mandatory in schools. So he can only speak enough to like get by.
Mm-hmm.
And they keep responding to him in Hebrew. He keeps saying, like, I don't speak Hebrew. Like, what is it that you're asking me? And then they say, let me see your ID. He's like, okay. He tells us, like, like this is already illegal. Like, there's no reason to ask people for ID at this security gate. But he showed it to them, and they said, like, no. And then the security guard goes and calls a police officer, one of the IDF soldiers, which is also crazy. There are like kids, right? Like 17, 18-year-olds with machine guns in the city. So she
Wow.
goes and calls the soldier, comes out with her gun, and she's like yelling at him in Hebrew. I think essentially they're frustrated that he's not talking to them in Hebrew. So they
Mm.
come out to us speaking in English and say, like, well, you guys can go in. We just won't let him go. And so we said, why? And they said, no, we just don't want to let him go. Like, you guys can go. Essentially showing us like they can speak in English. They just are choosing not to.
Right.
And Omar says to us, okay, like fine, I'll just stay out here, you go in. But I think the crazy part for me was that I felt conflicted about going in.
Mm.
I'd never wanted to see this wall, never thought about seeing this wall. But now, even while my Palestinian brother is being denied entry, I was like, oh, like look at this privilege that I have. Should I take it? Should I go to this wall and tell who that I've done it and like kind of leave him behind? I didn't do it. I stood outside and like stayed with him. But I was so aware of like how much privilege that I had and like how easy it was to live into it. To
Yeah.
say like, oh, okay, like they're not letting you in, that's cool. Like in your own town, in your own city, you can't go to this place. That's also yours.
Right.
That was, yeah. It made me realize that if this like small little um division between Palestinians and all others happens in broad daylight, how much worse is it like behind the wall? How much worse is it when 10 tourists aren't watching?
Right. Wow. Were you the only one who stayed outside with him?
8 of us stayed outside. Two
Okay.
people went in.
Okay. Wow. Okay, very last question, and then I will let you go. How does your everyday life feel after this visit? Do you ever think about going back or continuing your outreach about Palestine in other ways?
It's only been a few weeks since I've been back, and it feels like it's been so long.
Mm.
And coming back, we came back right into the season of Christmas, which I think was like so jarring. I feel like I had to turn off a part of my mind to
Mm.
like work the Christmas season. Because how do you go from like leaving behind people who might lose their lives, people who like you have grown to love and like see as so valuable, and recognizing like in a few months, in a few weeks, in a few days, like they might not exist.
Right.
And to come back and say like, yes, Jesus is so great, and like the reason for the season is Jesus. And to have seen Bethlehem, which is 60% under poverty, and to see Bethlehem that has only like 10 to 20% of Christians, and to see Bethlehem as we see in the West, this like idyllic, beautiful farmland where Jesus goes to get to be born. it was so disorienting. And so I had to like make that known to so many people, like, hey, this creche scene, actually, if you look in Bethlehem, is filled with checkpoints. The Magi can't actually come into Bethlehem because they won't be able to get the checkpoints. The shepherds won't be able to leave Bethlehem because of the checkpoints. Like, Bethlehem is surrounded by 8-meter high walls with barbed wire everywhere.
Wow.
And to come to Christmas, it was really, really complicated. But Palestinians asked us to do two things just over and over again, to ask people to come and visit. They felt like if people don't see it, they won't get it. And they're so scared about it. Ask people to come, experience the hospitality. And then two, tell the story of what you saw. Like, bear witness. And so I feel like I'm doing that. I have you're the first person for the year, and then I have a podcast with Shane Claiborne in a few days, which is like really, really cool.
Yeah.
The reach. And in my online series, I thought, okay, 1 million people will see 15 videos, but we're on video 9 and we're already at, I think, 2 million and like 200,000, which is so great because people are yearning to hear the stories.
Yes. Absolutely.
I hope to go back, but I hope others go back more than I do.
Yeah. Wow. That is so amazing. Thank you so much for your time and also your sacrifice for actually going and being there physically and interacting with everyone. It's been amazing to hear your story, and I do hope that more people are inspired by it if they decide to go or even just learn more themselves. But thank you so much again for doing this. It was really amazing to hear your story.
Thank you, Desiree. Thank you so much. Like, I feel like I'm so glad to be part of your coming back to yourself, coming back to writing, and for this to be part of that journey. Thank you for these excellent questions, and I'm so glad we got to do this.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, friend. You too. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning into this discussion. If there's anything that stood out to you, please let us know in the comments below. And also let us know if there's anyone else that you'd like to see highlighted on this platform. Once again, I'm Desiree Scarborough. This is Notes On, where we highlight noteworthy individuals, and I'll see you next time. Bye.